The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening. Welcome to the Agile Coaching Network. This is our 80th session together of just talking about things that are going on in the Agile universe. The ultimate goal of this, we want to surround the knowledge around Agile, not just with the people who've been doing it for a long time, but people who are just starting off have a completely different perspective that we might have lost over time. Not saying that I'm old, but there is a little bit of gray, but I've been bald since about 19, so that you can't really judge me by age there. A couple things to get out of the way. I just wanted to give a big shout out. We reached 150,000 downloads for the podcast, and that to me was just like a monumental moment. Community is incredibly important. One of the things that I was at the Agile Testing Days event this week, and that's why my voice is a little hoarse, because I happen to be one of these conference people that I'm going from conversation to conversation, even not just the presenting, but it's just like talking until the middle of the night, middle of the morning, actually, in certain cases. I've never been to Agile Testing Days. It started off in Germany, and then it's now been coming to the United States for a couple of years. Great community of people, one of the warmest bunches of people that I know. They really make you feel good about being at these events. They offered, when one of the conferences decided not to do the Business Agility Lab, they said, hey, come go do the Business Agility Lab over at our event. And they made some space for us. And we started to facilitate a couple of different sessions. And, one of the things also, to just make another special shout out, we got in contact with the Comic Agile crew, and we asked them, could we use one of your workshops? And then specifically the workshop is, let's go ahead and talk about the situations that you're dealing with within your company. And we mixed this up with the warm-up exercises that we used, was intended to bring people around to, let's get as many people talking about what they're dealing with. And that set us up into the drawing of cartoons. Now, I walked away from this session, to be honest with you, a little depressed. And as I show you some of the cartoons, and I know from the people listening to the podcast, you're not going to be able to see this, but we'll try to go get some of these out for you to see as well. But there was a lot of common themes that as we were going through this. And some of this being like anything from, I've got something new. And one cartoon was talking about proving it to the management, and the person went through proof after proof. This is one of the cartoon panes showed. And then at the end, it gets approved. And this is the common theme that we saw in most of these cartoons, is the person was dead in their seat. People were drawing the last pane of the cartoon as someone being in pain, the two different pains. Anything from that to even some of the older patterns that we would see with throwing things over the fence. And these were Agile teams talking about Agile teams, or the ones where you're going to management and management is in the ivory tower, and people are looking for resources in order to do their projects better. And 10 months later, still getting a no as a response to the request of whatever it might be. One cartoon was, a team player was, go put John on the project. Oh, and here's another project. Go put John on that project too. Go put John on this other project. Go put John on this other project. And the final pane was someone showing that John was all on all these projects, but it was like John's hand was in one of the projects and John's foot was on another part of the project and John's torso was on another, someone being, spread incredibly thin. If any of you are a CTO or a CEO or a vice president and you're on this call, POR, plan of record, doesn't build a product. You know what? My backlog doesn't build a product. And I can keep going down all of our little business processes. What builds a product is people. And equally as such, they build companies. And when we stop investing in our people, that's when we end up, not today, but a year from now, wondering why our profits are low. And so it becomes very important as it was going through these different pictures. And as I'm going to round this off and get to our question, but it was very clear to me about how people are dispensable in some regards. And that kind of left me a little bit wanting to get to this podcast and to have this conversation. The other thing that I did this last month that depressed me, and it wasn't meant to depress me, I was wanting to go off and find great stories about Agile. If you've known me for a number of years, I've been running this ongoing project called the Narrative Project. And this is where we're looking at Agile from a sense-making perspective, where people share their stories. And I was hoping that the picture that would evolve as people were putting in their stories and they were putting in their signifiers for it, that a different picture would be emerging from the Agile space. And unfortunately, of the 230 stories that were shared with me, and thank you for all of you who actually put in a story in that. If you go back up to LinkedIn, you can find my request to do that. And I'd encourage you to please come and enter your story as well. But the common pattern that we've seen over the last couple of years, and the dominant one, was that work environments around Agile are, and excuse my words, crappy. And that influences, as an Agile coach, influences a lot of what we do. The other thing is that the pattern's three-dimensional. So it was the most common pattern that came through was people felt ignored, they felt their environment was not that great, and they felt obligated to do Agile. Not synergistically working as a team to go get better as an organization. They felt they were being obligated and ignored, which is not a good, healthy pattern. So with that, this is what I started to think about, and where you guys can talk me down off of the water tower on this, because I walked away over the last couple of weeks thinking that this concept of that people build products and people build companies, that somehow people is getting erased from that. And so my question is on this, specifically in the Agile space, because I've been talking to Agile people. I haven't been talking to waterfall people. I haven't been talking to people who might be running some new great methodology that's not named yet. The question is, why are some Agile adoptions ignoring people and being more focused on frameworks and processes? And second part of that question is, how do we as a coaching community fix this? And so to kick this off, Sheila Eckhart, do you want to take a stab at this one? And I apologize, I put a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Ray. This is a great topic, and I had posted about this on LinkedIn a few months back because I was noticing the same with it's about frameworks. It's process and tools over individuals and interactions. But from a standpoint of fixing this, I've personally been working on some things in my toolbox. And I think as a coach, I've been doing this work in order to keep the focus as an Agile coach. So one of the things that I've done is to take a step back with people when I'm coaching them, and to go through a workshop on Agile. Not on the frameworks, not on anything, on what it means to be Agile, and to talk through scenarios. And I have to say, Ray, I did build upon what you did in the Business Agility Lab, in the Intro to Business Agility, you had that one scenario that we worked through. And I just recently changed my process to have a scenario around ChatGPT and how do you pivot for that. The other thing, and this is probably why I enjoy coaching teams, is that the focus on frameworks and processes is being often pushed from above, and people do feel like they're being forced into it. And as a team coach, which is what I really enjoy, I try to get the team to focus on how could they use this framework and these processes to make themselves more efficient and effective. and not how do they adhere to all the rules. Because I hear the same thing. Oh, Agile is just a whole set of rules that we have to adhere to. I think as a coach, we have to make sure that we're getting the teams to focus on being the best they can be within the guidelines of the frameworks and processes versus the rules, like the Shuhavri, knowing when to break the rules.
Sure, absolutely. So just as a follow-on question, what you were saying there, you're starting teams differently with kind of backing up a little bit, talking about these subjects a little bit more. Are you finding that people being receptive to it?
I am. I'm finding people wondering why they weren't brought into that part of it more. I've also have seen companies who have reached out and said, hey, we've done a lot of training on, it seems that our people don't really understand Agile. That gives me hope that we could move forward on this.
Yes. Actually, so again, I don't want people to get the impression that Ray has lost his faith on stuff. I'm still very positive of these things. Sheila McGrath, Scott just said, why is this going? Because it was sold to their company and they're buying a solution and it's more focused on certifications than anything else. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure it's focused on certifications, but I think they're making it very formulaic. They're thinking of it. I was just looking at something. There was one company I was in recently where they started with Essential Safe, and then they wanted to move to the next one, but they didn't want to add the meetings. They didn't really understand even Safe. And Safe is formulaic compared to a lot of other Agile frameworks. I think they're looking for something that's a one size fits all, that they can just apply the rules. That didn't even really work with Waterfall. And it's certainly the whole point of Agile is that you adapt. And I've heard a couple of people say who have been thought leaders in the Agile community for many years, that if you're still doing the same thing in 6 months, it's not Agile. Because you're supposed to be continuing to adapt because everything continues to change. But that's not certainty. And what these companies, especially when they're worrying about their financials, are worrying about is they want certainty. If you want certainty, you're not going to do anything creative. You're not going to do anything cutting edge. You're not going to take a chance on something that'll give you a competitive edge for the future, because you're playing it safe in the sense of the traditional meaning of the word, not in terms of the safe frameworks. But I think that's what I see a lot of companies doing. And I also see a lot of companies who say that they're Agile, but when they say that they're Agile, they're using the right terms. They're having meetings with the right titles, but they're still doing command and control. They're not empowering the team, and the team isn't allowed to think outside the box. And they're being told things like, in some companies that I've seen what they're doing, they'll have if they're doing SAFE and they're doing PI planning, they have deliverables due the day after PI planning. So there's no time to actually even follow the process that's in place, or that should be in place. They're adapting it. And the other thing, I was looking at the person on the railroad track and thinking, yeah, that's pretty much how it is. They split people between so many teams that they don't have time to do much of anything but attend meetings with all of these teams. When are they actually doing the work, other than participating in the meeting and maybe putting in their 2 cents worth? And the other thing, when you look at these big companies, I've been there as a consultant, but my external email looked like I was an employee. So a lot of times they don't want to pay expenses for people because they're not technically employees, but they're not paying them any more than they pay the employees. And they're not giving them as many benefits. So they're really focused on cost saving, but they're then not worried about continuity, specific industry or business knowledge that people acquire over time. They're looking at it as interchangeable warm bodies, which was never true of people. They've lost sight of people a lot more. The financial system tightens.
Which is interesting because I used to work with somebody told me a long time ago that you're going to have several different types of CEOs in your life. The first one's going to be the innovator, the one who started the company in the first place. The second one is going to be the bean counter, the one who is going to take whatever the kind of loose process and try to go narrow you down to boosting efficiency. Operational excellence comes into existence with an organization. And then the last one you get is a lawyer, and that's the person who's selling you off for parts because you've already jumped the shark on your product value itself. But I'm just curious when you say from the optimizing of dollars and that short-sightedness, where does that logic come from? Again, from us as coaches, we're trying to go influence the entire organization. Are we talking to the wrong people?
I think it comes from all the business schools that are looking at short-term profitability and not looking at long-term investment. Because when you talk about getting people training, getting people to attend conferences, getting people certifications, but not just getting a certification that takes a few days, but applying it and internalizing it and being able to adapt from that doesn't figure into a company that's looking at what can I show as profit this year, not even a 5-year plan, much less long-term profitability. A lot of companies just aren't looking at that.
They're looking at the short-term street numbers that they're trying to go obtain or achieve. Another twist to this in your org, maybe you can give some perspective on this. I know you and we've worked together for a long time, and we've been through phases of CMMI and ISO 9000, and Scott posted another thing on the little chat line here. We've seen these trends where in the very beginning, when they're novel and we're all learning stuff up on it, it feels, at least myself, it feels more people-y in the very first. And then it institutionalizes into that space of now we've got to go and just follow the process. Have you seen that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is part of the problem. So the label Agile in itself is a bit the problem because, first of all, we're dealing a lot with engineers. So they look for the perfect or the predefined or clearly achievable solution. So they think when they hear Agile, Scrum, whatever, you tell me how to do it, I do it, it will work. Because that's what they learned. That's how physics works, how you get from cause to effect. And that doesn't work with people. One coach I really appreciate once said, there is no root cause in front of 20 engineers, and they all went berserk. And then he added with people. And I think that's what matters a lot. We can't coach organizations, we need to coach people, and they then need to bring this into the organizations. And a lot of stuff that I've seen on the comics that you talked about is something that I'm currently working a lot in my company to improve, but that didn't start out with Agile. That started out with the way they worked. That's if people don't have time to cooperate, to share, to talk to each other, because there are whatever kind of boundaries, whatever limitations or pressures, and that doesn't matter which framework you follow. If you don't have some slack in your organization, then it doesn't work. For production, they learned that having absolutely no reserves, then you're close to bankruptcy because all your money will be locked up in buffers. So that's an old learning from Lean. But for development and other operations, we don't learn that actually stopping to think and getting really the people to be attentive is the high benefit. And I think that's the big change. We don't need to talk about Agile. We don't even need to talk actually about the principles. We need to bring to the people, this is my vision how your life's going to get better. This is my 3 ideas how we can approach it. Pick one. And then when they're through this, then tell them, actually, there's a theory behind it. You've experienced that it works. Listen to the theory. Can you think of things that will work better to grow? And then actually they still need to be empowered and not resources, but actually assets to the company. And I'm really struggling to make that distinction, and it's not my idea. I heard, I don't know, in a military podcast, I think it was a major or a general from US Marine Corps saying that our people are precious, even though they might die in their service, they're precious. So we never call them resources. We always call them assets because we really care for them.
I think in most regards, every time I hear, number one, I used to have a t-shirt that said, I'm a person, not a resource. But the way, even the accounting that's done around people, we're going to go do head count. Remember that? It's like head count. This is not, we're not headhunters. We're collecting skulls. These are people with lives and everything else. Let's see. Scott, are you there?
Yeah, I was just thinking about all of these great comments, and I was like thinking you could talk for hours about all of the various pockets within organizations of anti-agile patterns, from executive leadership to middle management to business versus IT. And right now I'm working in a situation where I'm working with a team where we're doing a lot of great things, and to try to focus on people versus process. We tried something along the lines where we do things like moving motivator exercises and personal journey lines to really focus on the personal relationships of the members of the team. And where we actually rolled out a kind of a Scrum-Bond framework at a very high level to allow folks to not worry about the framework so much, because we would adapt the framework to how we work, and that we would use our sources of dissatisfaction to iterate on our framework to make it fit what we needed. But then we've also seen the flip side of where middle management and the executives don't really understand Agile and keep trying to gain control of what we're trying to do at the team level. So you're working in this world of an Agile world versus a command and control world, and those two don't play nice together. And I told my manager the other day that we're allowed to be all of the Agile we want to be, as long as we're command and control.
And what was his response?
He agreed, because he's seeing the same kinds of things I am. And I happen to have a manager that I've worked with for 25 years. So we see things very similarly, and we have a lot of trust built up with each other.
So it's kind of a follow-on question to you on this is, so do you think that we are spending more time just admiring the problem than actually getting to that solution space? What is the way? Because when we get into crisis, command and control takes a different flavor. When we're at the top of our game, then of course it takes a different flavor as well. Is this about us as coaches expanding who we're working with, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work recently with the leadership circle profile and that executive leadership level. And to me, my experience, and I don't know if others have seen this, but if you're not doing an enterprise-wide Agile transformation, then you see the teams are trying to be Agile and everything above them is command and control. And those things always end in kind of misery. So then you start looking at the firms that are doing enterprise-wide Agile transformations, and those can have their own angst, even though the executives are trying. But it's really like, where, are they getting the Agile coaching themselves and looking to move themselves from a very command and control way of thinking to more of that teal Agile way of thinking, and taking the good from the command and control that they've had over years, and then shedding the stuff that's maybe not going to help them as much in an Agile world, and gaining those new Agile insights and new Agile ways of working to help the entire organization move forward.
Yes, I go. Oh, Sheila, please go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I agree with a lot of that. And I do believe that one of the issues that I have seen is the competency models that are in place. And this is, again, Ray, one of the things that we talked about at Agile 2022, which is the frozen middle, because their competency model, it creates this need for them to have command and control, because they feel very dependent on that for what they're being looked at in a review process. And I do think that there's a lot with, you can make the teams agile, but yes, when you get into leadership, sometimes it's just trying to get feature after feature and not about new ways of working, in the sense of not just new ways of working in a framework, which is really where a lot of people are looking at it. Oh, we're going to give you this framework. It's a new way of working.
I have no disagreement with that. I think I've done exercises at just about every time when we're bringing in Scrum or bringing in some other different framework, that we have managers that are in the room and we start to discuss with them, write down on a sticky note the stuff that you're responsible for to do today, every day. What are you responsible for to do monthly, annually, quarterly, all those things. And notoriously, when we do that exercise and we ask them to now take the things that we're giving to another role with what's being created, and they go move some of those sticky notes to those other people, you always ask them and say, now look down at what's in front of you. And there's still a lot of stuff that's there. And you ask them the question, do you do any of that? Because you just took what would be considered another job and you just put it up onto the walls that it's now going to be responsible by the product owner and the scrum master. All of the stuff that's down there, have you been able to do good with those? And they've always will say that, no, I'm spending too much time doing the tactical stuff than being the strategic brain that I need to be for the team and thinking forward on things, which is bad in some regards. Let's see. We've got a couple of people's with hands up. Give me a second here. And Ali Reza.
Hey, yeah, thank you. It's a great discussion. One thing that crossed my mind is that I've seen coaches that are coming to organizations and they are not aligned with the goal of the organizations. One thing that I've been seeing recently in LinkedIn, a lot of people put posts around it, is the carrier of people who are agile coaches. And then I think there is another group that are just process coaches. As you said, CEOs are different. So some of them are looking for more tangible results. And those are sometimes going and looking for those process coaches who are coming and changing something and they see right away, not the results, but how people are working differently. So they are more in favor of that, and it usually fails because nobody understood what Agile is. On the other side, I've seen coaches coming to the companies and all they think about is people, but they're not aligning these changes with what the company goal or their group goal is. And they fail as well because they help with people, they build up a really agile, small teams, but they never get to work together toward the company goal. So trying to balance that, I think, is very important, because if I'm working with a smart CEO or CTO or VP, I cannot ask them to just trust me because I'm an agile coach. I need to show them some results, very small ones in that J curve, that they see incremental results. So I want to start with something that purely just affect the teams and dynamic of the team. I would start with something that I want to change in my priority that is going to affect the whole product, maybe a value stream mapping, something that they see the results right away and build up the trust before trying to focus only on the people in the team and going to human resource, say, hey, from now on, instead of calling people resources, call them people. That usually doesn't work. I would push it to maybe the 3rd, 4th to 6 months that I'm working with a company. So that was my comment on this.
No, I think your comments are good, but I'm curious. One of the cartoons was the proof followed by, okay, you're going to finally get an approval on something. And we are probably, when we're talking about this, we're pushing against management culture versus development culture and other things versus the company culture. And I guess, do you believe that the fact is that when we focus too much on the process space, or even as as you said, the life coach type of model of helping an individual, do you think that it's really what we're missing here is that we should be attacking at the top level of whatever's on that company poster that says that how we are as a company, that we're not spending enough time working on those things to shift the habits of the team so that we can all be on the same cultural page?
Interestingly, I think both of them should go at the same time because I've tried and worked with a president who was very aligned with Agile, even like very Agile minded. But then once we helped the leadership team understand and executives and everyone, they completely understood it, like not completely, but like to a great extent. Then we had people on the team who a lot of them have heard of Agile and they've done Scrum at some point in their life, and they were not ready to move on and do all these processes and look at it like in an Agile way. They looked at it more like a process. It's much easier to fix, I agree, but I think both of them should start moving at the same time. A little bit of the team change, a little bit of the middle management change, a little bit in the executive. Each one of them that moves much faster might result in like early failure of the whole transportation. That at least has been my experiment.
Sure. Doctor, you're in the house. What do you have on this?
Ray, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good to hear your voice.
Hey, nice to hear. Nice to see this all happening. Hey, so my challenges, like I really appreciate the participants here, and it's really great to hear and learn from them. So my challenge is, so when you do a project, they like the agile terminology being used. They will say we are very agile minded and blah blah blah. So nice some words they say, but what they're looking for is output versus outcome. So the number game, how many test cases are you doing it for the product? And nobody cares about what is the coverage. That is, you come to know later. We don't care. Just give me the number. So that is really challenging, but you cannot really. A number game is good, so, to at least to get some funding. So let's say this team is going to produce maybe a 2,000 requirement versus compliance testing in this month or maybe 2 months. Then there's good, but nobody is bothered to ask the coverage. The coverage again comes from the customer. What other customers are interested in, what value we are adding. The value proposition has never been looked at it. And somehow there are pretty PowerPoint slides and other flashing things being talked about. And then in the end, then really when the customers start to leave you, then the whole thing is put on to maybe the project get canceled or completely, then the price is paid by the employees who were trying to do the right thing. So that's what I'm seeing. How do you coach this type of scenarios? How do you make sure that your management understand what is the value you bring instead of just the numbers to a project?
Yeah, the numbers game is hard because I've worked on probably what you would consider to be the early days of continuous integration. And we built a massive system back when I was over at Intel on how to we were capturing like a terabyte of test information per day on graphics testing. But then the problem space shifted. It wasn't about running a test anymore. It was about how the heck do we do analysis on so much data that we were collecting. But yeah, people were more focused on, wow, big number. You're getting a lot of tests going through. But that question of whether or not if you ran the conditional decisional coverage on the stuff, we were getting like 50%, some low number where there were branches we were literally not touching, but nobody cared about that part. The other thing too, and this was another thing that we did for this round of the Business Agility Lab that we did this week, was we were looking at how do we get people onto the same page. And one of the techniques that Shauna, who's not here to stick up for herself on this, but she put up the trade-off sliders, which was, these are the 5 things that are most key important to the program. And then the one model that she used had, I think, ease of use, performance, rapid iterations to get lots of customer feedback, scalability, time to market. And one of her techniques is that she brings all of the key stakeholders in the room, both from development, customer, and also the business side of the management. And the way that the sliders work is, what is the most important and what is the least important? And you have to ordinally rank these. You can't have everything important. It's got to be one of them. And I'm curious, Sheila or Jorg or any of the ones who's got your microphones active, what might have been a way that you've approached this to get everyone on the same page?
Yeah, maybe if I may, what you described about how Shauna is approaching this is a bit similar what I try to do. It's the trade-off approach. The reason for high importance is as well really important to talk about the why something matters, because there might be cheaper ways to get it. But if you don't really understand the full motivation, maybe from business, what their sales message really is, then you might build a lot of stuff that is not really needed. Biggest experience I had there was a long discussion ending in, okay, we're all happy, we don't need to implement anything, and we can write onto the box exactly what's needed with no loss to customer experience. But if it didn't create that exchange, that would have been many years of implementation. So it's really about valuing each voice and getting a bit further from I need this to I want to do this with the information results. That's what really matters to me.
Sure.
But
go ahead.
Definitely important thing here is start off with let's try to fulfill all the things. Because if people think they are immediately forced to make trade-offs and leave things behind, they often feel uncomfortable. But when you start off with, ideally, we want to do everything that's worthwhile, but we don't know exactly how to do it. It's a different discussion.
Even in the course of experimentation, getting alignment on, if you think of attributes associated to your product, and I think it's affectionately in certain circles called non-functional requirements, which is a stupid name, but the attributes that we're going to all look back upon. One of the things that us always talking over each other, even in prioritization later, is that we somehow ignore those components to that user experience that we're trying to go create. But I think I'm starting to get into this case where you guys say you're digressing. So I'm gonna pull back from that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So on some of this, one of the things that I have noticed in this space is when you're talking about like prioritization, and there's always this list of this is what I want versus this is what I'm trying to achieve. And one of the things that I've was able to do as a coach with some teams is to get them to focus on the outcome. What is the outcome? Forget about all these different things that might be in the, oh, I want this feature, or I want that feature. What are you looking for in that feature? And try to focus it on that way, where you can then prioritize the outcomes that you're looking for, which then can prioritize the items that you have in the list. And I did have a lot of success with one team who did that approach, which also created a good collaboration between everybody involved. And I think as a coach, and somebody had asked, how do we fix all of this? I think as a coach, we need to make those small changes. You don't want to try to create this big change and be, okay, we need to focus on this or we need to focus on that. But this one small change of doing a 180 on the viewpoint really did make a big difference.
Yeah, maybe to add to this and maybe connected to something you asked, Ray, sometimes it depends where you are actually in the process of creating the product or correcting the product. So if you're in a really either infant situation, you're starting something completely new, so lots of vectors are open, or you are in a really crisis situation, sometimes it's okay to have somebody just pick with a good, let's say, target line of I'm doing this to achieve that result. Make sure you're going to measure the result and get fast feedback, and thereby then only get the decision started based on concrete feedback. Because if you have a lot of people who know that they don't know a lot of stuff, then maybe just make somebody pick and start is as well an option. And that is probably something that we sometimes generally miss in Agile, that go from a decision and drive from evaluation of that decision, how you improve, can be as valuable as doing the theory first.
I think you said it earlier in the call, which is I'm going to lead people through, hey, why don't we try something to increase communications in the team? How about we get together daily and just go for a team sync? I didn't actually say a stand up. Let's see it and see how that works. Does it actually help people? A couple of the other things as I'm reading through the comments, and I know some people put some questions in there, and I apologize. I'm not meaning to ignore some of the questions that are in there, but I've got a lot of things on the chat line too. By the way, if anyone would like to join the call and raise your hand, bringing you in does give you a higher priority because you get to control the mic for a little bit, which is really cool. But some of the anti-patterns, again, with breaking into sort of the us and them situations of management would like everything. Product owners are stuck in the middle of trying to go negotiate that through. And then depending on how strong the team is to deflect whether or not, say, a sprint is disrupted because there's more work than people, and not accepting the fact that you have a prioritized backlog. There's stuff at the bottom of your backlog for a reason. That harken back to waterfall days, we only delivered 40 to 50% of the POR originally. When people seem to get a little bit more wrapped around the axle when you're not working on the bottom 10% of your sprint backlog, which is you don't have enough time to do everything from that regard. We were like 5 minutes left. Darn it, we needed 5 hours for this conversation, and I apologize for that. I just want final thoughts from the people who have their microphones, currently active right now. What is the one thing that we can do to recenter this? And if you have a last bit comment of something we need to continue to explore. Sheila, did you want to go first? Sheila McGrath.
One thing is that if you're looking at a new product, people can focus on what truly is the minimum viable product, which sometimes technical people get confused and think that means it needs to be only minimally functional and can have major flaws, and that's really not what's meant. But if you can get the business side of the house to look at what do they need in order to have a viable product, and even going forward, what do they need to have a product that will be competitive in the future? Because what you usually find is you don't just have one or two stakeholders. You may have 10 or 15 or 20 that each represent different parts of the business and each have their own list of priorities. I know what I've done occasionally is try to get them all in a physical or virtual room and talk about their priorities and vote on them together. Because if you get their individual priorities, you may be focused on something that's really important to one department, but it's really not going to make a big difference to the product success as a whole. And if they sat down with the rest of the business units and talked about what the impacts are, they may realize that while what they want would be great to have, it's just not that important in the greater scheme of keeping the product competitive.
Agreed with that. Anyone else want to just chip in? We've got about 2 minutes left. Last thought, just dive in.
I think it's worthwhile looking at the competences and flexibility. So if we look at the Shuhari model, some things we do can really reasonably stick in the shoe space for a long time because we need reliability of repetition more than we need innovation. And we have people who are not yet at the point where they can move forward, where we need the people on the other side to see where's the potential in the organization and get the discussion rolling. Not everything must change. Some things should be safe places for people to just learn the motions, repeat the motions, and do them a little bit better every time, either communication, prioritization, whatever. And then maybe somebody comes up with saying, that's our next big step, let's go there. Awesome. And then you multiply it and you learn in steps because you learn, you practice, and then you can learn again. If we stop practicing and just rush, that might as well not be good. And maybe that's a chance to get as well to the CEOs of this world to say, here, I'm giving you something you can rely on, but please be really inventive on that space because that's your strength.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So we're unfortunately, the most precious commodity that we have is time. And unfortunately, we're running out. If you guys would like to join and hang out with some of the Agile, our co-hosts here, I know Deanna Larson is going to be speaking in Agile 2023, and I will be speaking in Agile 2023 and having some free time because I won't be running a business agility lab there. So I will be hanging around being a learner as well through that. Sheila Eckhart or anyone else going to Agile 2023?
I will be there, right?
You will be?
I will not be speaking, but I will be assisting on a session that's going to be happening.
You can also come in and help me with my community of practice one if you would like to come in and help with that tutorial. That would be great.
Sure.
Anyone else is going?
This is Scott Weldon.
Scott, you're going to be there?
Yep.
That's awesome, man.
Forward to it. It's my first time, so I'm very excited.
I am fully willing to get an ACN community round of beer someplace, wherever that might be. Or let me reframe that. The lovely beverage of choice place, wherever that might be. Let's make sure that we all get connected and go there. The other thing that's I'm looking forward to it. Also on October 26th and 27th, we're going to be running a standalone business agility lab here in Portland, Oregon, where I live. That event, you can go over to the businessagilitylab.org and take a look at it. And that is also going to have, Deanna Larson is going to be one of our co-facilitators, and Shauna, who's also one of our co-hosts, is also going to be there as well. I think it's going to be a good 2-day inclusive event where it goes from morning to into the evening and the next day. The next ACN Live event is on June 23rd. And as everyone knows, if you don't know this, but this does become a podcast. If you're not a subscriber already, just go ahead and go to your favorite service and hit subscribe, hit the hearts, do whatever it takes, share it with your friends, your family. I'm not sure if your family will care too much about it, but you never know. There might be some Agilist someplace. And with that, I want to let everyone, I hope that you have, if you're coming into your summer, hopefully you have a beautiful end of your spring, or if you're coming into fall, that you're, going through whatever goodness that goes on as you're getting ready for winter. And with that, I hope you have a really great month.
The ACN podcast is for educational and informative use only. If you'd like to know more about the ACN community, please come up to acnpodcast.org and support our show.